to me, self-regulation is like at the heart of it. I think confidence is another one. I mean, so, even as you just told your story, and seeing this improvement in different areas in your life. But would you like attribute any of that to, hey, being more confident? Like, I own these feelings and emotions. I can show them. I don't have to be like, I don't have to hold that back. You're not going to judge me for, showing those emotions. You can see it in you, that level of confidence.
100%. But my confidence was, because this is something that used to annoy the snot out of me. So, I love, personalities and stuff, right? And I use a very simple model. I know there's a ton of different personality models out there. I use one called Personality Plus, with choleric, sanguine, melancholy, phlegmatic. And the type A ones, the cholerics, the type A, the drivers, right? They just will just, and you see it in hundreds of books out there, leadership books and from big influencers. You just got to believe in yourself. And I used to hate that. Well,
Yeah.
a guy who has a low self-image, who's insecure, who hates himself, how do I just believe in myself? Like, I'm a pretty, fairly smart guy. How do I even do that? And it wasn't until, again, getting emotionally healthier that I was able to become more confident, because I started to, again, as I, healed in all these different areas, I stopped becoming a people pleaser. I started to believe in myself more, but it wasn't until I became emotionally healthier that my confidence started to rise.
Yeah. And that's where we find, so when we talk about like the mental skills, we talk in performance psychology about 5 different mental skills. So we'll talk about a performance mindset to begin with. And then we talk about confidence using imagery. So I'd say imagery because, polysensory, not just visualization. That used to be the buzzword, was visualization. But, I think the more that you can make that visualization real with like other senses of, touch or sound, the visual, all those mental reps, right? So confidence, imagery, and then attention control. And that's where I think self-regulation comes in and like just intersects with our performance psychology model. And then goal setting. And so a kind of a combination of those elements. And we work on different, prongs of that, but that's essentially like the model that we show to get, to basically build mentally tough leaders of character.
Welcome to the EQ for Entrepreneurs podcast. Like most business owners, you already know you need good business and marketing strategies to scale and be profitable. But at some point, you've hit the dreaded wall where you feel stuck and frustrated. EQ for Entrepreneurs is for business owners and leaders who are honest enough to admit that they just might be the ones holding their business back and are brave enough to change that.
We're Noble and Kathy, and every week we're having candid conversations about all things emotional intelligence and how growing that has allowed us to get out of our own way and is radically transforming both our businesses and our personal lives. This is the secret sauce strategy for modern entrepreneurs who are tired of hustling without seeing results and want to grow a business and a life that they love.
Noble!
Darcy! What's going on? Awesome, man. It's so good to see you.
You too. Look at that beard, man.
It's my wisdom.
Look at that. That is awesome. That takes work.
That's right. It's part of my my Colorado uniform. Well, so thank you so much for doing this, Darcy.
Oh, my pleasure. I was excited.
Now, you and Troy have been at West Point for a while now, right?
For a while, since 2013. Well, Troy got here in 12.
Wow.
I got here in 13, but he retired in 15. And then I got here and I thought I'd retire in 2018. And then just the little things, right? Like, oh, you're a made academy professor, and then, oh, you made '06, and then you're like, well, stick it out, for a while.
That's right. That's awesome. So
Yes.
what was your journey? How did you become the big cheese at West Point here? So what does your glide path look like? And
Yeah.
how did you end up, where you're at right now?
So, I mean, I had always, you know, the advice you get from mentors of like, be a fence sitter as long as you can, right? Like, be operational or you academic. Operational or academic, don't make a decision till the Army makes you make a decision. And that happened for me in 2012. It was compete for battalion command or go back to West Point and teach after a deployment. And now West Point's got a model where if you get like selected for battalion command, you can go and go do that, and it kind of makes a pause, and we'll try to bring you back after battalion command. But in 2011, when it was compete for battalion command or go to graduate school, it was kind of an either or sort of scenario, which I was very happy. I left 2 kids at home with my parents for a year, and it was an easy decision for me to say, you know what, I would love to go back to West Point and teach. So that was a no-brainer for me.
Yeah, sure, sure.
Yeah, and then so I had a couple tours teaching sociology and leadership and behavioral sciences and leadership, and loved that. It was the if you remember PL 300.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so it was the PL 300 course director, and
No way.
yeah, so I loved teaching, talking about leadership, and then this opportunity came open, the Center for Enhanced Performance. Kind of had a shortfall, like all of a sudden they had an '05 who couldn't come. My time had just kind of come up and was close to the end of my tour in BSNL, and it was, do I compete for an academy professor in BSNL, or do I retire, or here's an opportunity, because at this point Troy had not retired, and so we thought he was retiring and that I retire and we'd be out of the military. And so I was like, I wasn't sure I wanted to commit, and apply to be an academy professor, because that's kind of super long-term commitment. So I wasn't settled on that, but this job, they said, I interviewed for Center for Enhanced Performance and got the job. And I was like, that's perfect. It'll take me out till 2018. I'll retire and then we'll leave. And then the dean decided that she wanted to make the CEP director a 47 job. And I absolutely love what I do. And so this was like back in, 16, 17 timeframe. And I was like, how can I not put my name in for something that I absolutely love? So I got selected, and the rest is history. And then, like the Army, how it drops like little carrots, right? Then you're like, the oldest guy, like picked up for '06. It was funny. It was
awesome.
Chris Corpella, me, Kirk Ingold, and someone else, right? There were like 4 of us who like got promoted on 1 January, because we were like all 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the list, because we were like the 96ers. So
That's awesome.
that was funny. But yeah, so I've just had an amazing experience here, and I got pulled, tasked, voluntold. I got to work on character development at West Point. So I got pulled out of CEP for about 8-9 months to work for the superintendent. And we stood up a new organization. This was some of the work that I was doing on character, called the Character Integration Advisory Group. So it's essentially headed by kind of like a civilian 1-star equivalent. And it's a new organization that is responsible for ensuring that character development is integrated throughout all of our programs. So
And you'll be involved in that, or
sort of like I
okay.
will have like the Center for Enhanced Performance. We define characters, the performance facet of character and grit and resilience, and that's very much my lane. In academics, in character, etc. But so I won't have a formal role in that.
Wow, that's awesome, Darcy. And so for the Center for Enhanced Performance, is that specifically for athletes, or could any cadet take advantage of that?
Yeah, it's very different than like if you remember when we were cadets, like the egg chair, and that was for Core Squad cadets, and that was about it. I now have 18 people in my department, and we have 4 performance psychologists who work with Core Squad cadets, but also work across the spectrum. Like we teach the psychology of elite performance as like a BSNL course. So we teach like a 4 credit hour or a 3 credit hour course. We have courses like the fundamentals of performance psychology. So like any cadet that wants to get better, learn more about focus, attention control, building your confidence, goal setting, like a 10 lesson elective course. Any cadet can take that, and we do like survival swim workshops routinely to help cadets who, of the mental skills that, help you be successful in swim, virtual reality, things like that. So that's part of it. Then I have like 6 folks that are athletic academic support coordinators, and they are kind of by NCAA regulations, you do have to have someone who's focused and kind of overwatching academics and making sure that cadets meet eligibility requirements, aren't falling behind, can say to the coach like, hey, Johnny is failing. Like he doesn't need to go to practice this week, or, in work with the coaches and things like that. So I kind of have academics for Core Squad athletes. And then I have 5 other people that are also academically focused on like academic skills, time management, organization, different things like that. We teach student success course, kind of like a freshman seminar. Work with a lot of kids who are academically struggling. But then we also teach like critical thinking and information literacy, which is like basically cadets you might find on a scholarship track later. So we tend to work a lot in the ends of the bell curve, the tails, if you will. Cadets who are really struggling, cadets who are excelling in ODIA, and like I'm going to be an All-American goalie. I need to work on my mental game. We work with those athletes, like the teams, team building, and the performance psychology applied to their sport. But where we've tried to make great inroads is like over the last year, we met with over 1,100 cadets, individual cadets. So like that's about a quarter of the core that is coming to CEP for something.
Wow.
So it's not just our Core Squad athletes and our cadets who struggle. We're really trying to appeal to the middle of cadets like, hey, you're getting C's and B's. You're on nobody's radar, but you can probably be better, right? You're probably not maximizing yourself. You're probably not getting everything you can get out of this experience. Some people of those kind of realize like, hey, I can do more. And some are perfectly fine being middle of the road and on nobody's radar. And they are probably the kids we never see.
Got it.
And then another population we work a lot with is we started a return to learn program. So if you think about concussions and all that we've come to know about concussions, in the last decade, like if you remember when we were cadets, it was like spelling salts. Okay, get back in the ring, right? Like, oh,
Right.
and we just know that's just bad science, right? And that concussions, are, have a serious ramifications, physically and mentally. And so what we started is a program, like we got all smart on return to play, right? So, hey, there's a concussion protocol for you to be able to, get back on the field. But we didn't really have that for the classroom. So I remember like one of my first cadets, I was a course director, and he went on leave to New York City over Labor Day weekend and got hit by a car in walking across the street. Like fractured his femur, terrible, accident, but also a really bad concussion. And he, is back in class, walking on crutches and stuff, but still he's back in class right away. But then he was really sleepy in class. I didn't think anything of it. I was like, come on, man, you've missed a bunch of classes. Like, stay with me. And he did AI. We worked a lot, making sure he was ready for the exam. And then he takes the exam, and like the last half the points were essays, right? He didn't even like write anything in the essay. And I brought him in. I was like, what happened? Like, I did AI with you. I know you know this stuff. And he's like, yes, ma'am. But I just like, I can't write. I can't put my thoughts together, pen to paper. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I realized like, how symptomatic he was from the concussion, but we had no protocol to return to learn. So now we have a full program. We see 200 cadets a year, and we help them. It's essentially like a cognitive profile for the classroom. Like, so, hey, you can be in class, but we recognize you might get sleepy. You might have to take a break. You need to sit in the front of the classroom, not the back, to minimize eye strain. You might have to take breaks like every 15 minutes in a class. You might not have any papers, or we work with the instructors, so you don't have any papers due for the next 2 weeks. Like, and so it used to be like, you'd think, oh, so-and-so's a shammer using a concussion to get out or whatever. Like, you can be here, you can write the paper, right? And now we've really changed the culture and the mentality around it. Like, no, you need to take a break. There's an on-ramp to getting back into full speed in the classroom. We'll push back your term end exam, whatever. And so I'm really proud of how far West Point's come in recognizing our concussion care and protocols.
That's huge, Darcy. Those are some phenomenal programs that you are a part of and have helped develop. So you've mentioned a number of words that are that get me all excited. So I think a lot of us are super passionate about a lot of the topics. And I've been in the emotional health and emotional intelligence space now for a few years, because I've lived for 98% of my life emotionally clueless. And so the old emotional clue bus, drove by, and I would just wave.
So no, I would never think that of you, because when I think of you as a cadet, I think of you as one of the most joy-filled people who always had a smile, brought smiles to other people's faces, even when we were plebes. Like when you were rooming with Kevin Lilly, and I'd come in like, oh man, today sucked. And you're like, well, what sucked about today? Like, well, I don't know. And you're like, no, it's awesome. It's a great day to be alive. So I would say you were probably one of the most emotionally intelligent cadets I knew.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, thank you, Darcy.
100%.
Coming from the head of CEP, I'll take that. Thanks a million. So so here's what's funny about that. So, the four main domains, or I know there's a lot of different EQ models, EI models
Yep.
and stuff. But so just I guess one of the industry OGs, Daniel Goleman.
We use Daniel Goleman. We taught 2 lessons of emotional intelligence I brought into PL 300.
No way.
So we use Goleman's model. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. So what's funny is, so I would say my social awareness has always been fairly developed.
Yes.
But here's the funny thing is, what I discovered in the past handful of years is it's only been developed for unhealthy reasons. Because I'm a recovering people pleaser addict. And so as a recovering people pleaser addict, I have made, as a people pleaser, I've made, 99% of my decisions based on making other people happy and, managing all that space of others and trying to, be liked and all because of a low EQ, because of being emotionally needy. Okay. And so what's funny, I guess the irony is, how God works is like, so obviously my family of origin, we never discussed emotions or feelings ever. So
really?
We'd yell and scream at each other. And then after we'd get done yelling and screaming at each other, we'd stomp off into our respective corners of the house, come back an hour later and say like, hey, so what's for dinner? Or how's the weather? Or how'd the Mets do? And zero conflict resolution skills, zero acknowledgement of feelings and emotions. So that was my whole childhood. And then, of course, West Point in those days, they don't, hey, how you feeling? Right. That was not, no one cared. Right. That was not a big deal. And then, of course, Ranger School and, infantry officer basic course. Obviously, we're not talking about feelings and emotions there. In the 82nd, infantry officer, not, no one cares about feelings and emotions there. And so this whole time, so fast forward, then business, been an entrepreneur for 20 some years and not really any discussions about feelings and emotions there. And so then finally what happened is I yelled at my wife 3 to 4 times in a span of a month. And this was maybe 5 years ago. And she said, dude, 3 things. Number 1, don't ever do that again. No, number 2, you've never done this before. So number 3, that means you got issues, bro. Like something's wrong with you, right? Yeah. And so we went to counseling, and our counselor introduced me to this revolutionary new concept called feelings and emotions. Like, what? What are these things you speak of? And so that kind of started our journey. And what's been crazy, Darcy, is as I have been intentionally growing my emotional intelligence through emotional healing and all this different areas, I have been shocked to find, and not even consciously, but like all of a sudden, all these different areas of my life are starting to improve. My faith, my marriage, my parenting, my finances, my business, all these different, and I'm like, I had no idea that emotional health and emotional intelligence impacts all these different areas. Of course, and I didn't understand the physiology of how decision-making happens and all these different things, and not realizing that we all, like, our decision-making process goes through our emotional center of the brain before our logic even, kicks in. And so then I'm like, I can't be the only emotionally clueless person out there. Like, there's got to be other nobles out there. Right. So that's when we started our podcast on last year on emotional intelligence. It's called EQ for Entrepreneurs. And so now it's like, I'm trying to tell, as many people that will listen, like, man, guys, like if you're struggling in an issue, and obviously not that there's a guarantee that there's something going on emotionally, but even the big ones in the Army, like, talked to a lot of our classmates and stuff, the SHARP, suicide prevention, inclusion and diversity, all these different areas. I'm like, EQ impacts that stuff.
Oh, yes.
You know what I mean? And so I that's why, I love interviewing a bunch of our classmates, just like, and for you, just where you're at, EQ has to play, I got to believe, just in my little grid, EQ has got to play a role in enhanced performance, in human performance, in the military and even as civilians, right? I interviewed Lee Rivas and Kelly, Fairbrother, but Kelly
Yeah, yeah,
McKechnie and right,
yes,
these baller, Justin Kramer, big baller NASA guy, right? These
yeah.
crazy baller classmates, and so EQ impacts regardless of what track you do, military career, civilian career. EQ plays a massive role, and I would love to just get some of your insights on what have you seen to be some of those connections in optimal human performance in relationship to emotional intelligence.
So I would say one of the things, and we do sometimes even talk very about specifically about that link. And to me, self-regulation is like at the heart of it. I think confidence is another one. I mean, so even as you just told your story, and seeing this improvement in different areas in your life, but would you like attribute any of that to, hey, being more confident? Like, I own these feelings and emotions. I can show them. I don't have to be like, I don't have to hold that back. You're not going to judge me for, showing those emotions. You can see it in you, that level of confidence.
100%. But my confidence was because this is something that used to annoy the snot out of me. So, I love, personalities and stuff, right? And I use a very simple model. I know there's a ton of different personality models out there. I use one called Personality Plus, the choleric, sanguine, melancholy, phlegmatic. And the type A ones, the cholerics, the type A, the drivers, right? They and you see it in hundreds of books out there, leadership books and from big influencers. You just got to believe in yourself. And I used to hate that. Well,
Yeah.
a guy who has a low self-image, who's insecure, who hates himself, how do I just believe in myself? Like, I'm a pretty, fairly smart guy. How do I even do that? And it wasn't until, again, getting emotionally healthier that I was able to become more confident, because I started to, again, as I, healed in all these different areas, I stopped becoming a people pleaser. I started to believe in myself more, but it wasn't until I became emotionally healthier that my confidence started to rise.
Yeah. And that's where we find, so when we talk about like the mental skills, we talk in performance psychology about 5 different mental skills. So we'll talk about a performance mindset to begin with. And then we talk about confidence using imagery. So I'd say imagery because polysensory, not just visualization. That used to be the buzzword, was visualization. But, I think the more that you can make that visualization real with like other senses of, touch or sound, the visual, all those mental reps, right? So confidence, imagery, and then attention control. And that's where I think self-regulation comes in and like just intersects with our performance psychology model. And then goal setting. And so a kind of a combination of those elements. And we work on different, prongs of that, but that's essentially like the model that we show to get, to basically build mentally tough leaders of character. And then when I think about emotional intelligence, I'll have a kid. Now in this job, I work a lot with freshmen, right, with plebes. And so, I'll be talking about confidence, and you're talking to a plebe who's like getting beat down every day, nothing's good. And they're often, it's a kinder, gentler West Point now, but still, right? It's not easy to be confident, especially you come here, and this model is made to make you fail, right? If you aren't failing, you're not trying hard enough. It's developmental. There's so much growth in how you handle failure. That's part of the leader development system at West Point. And so sometimes I find having conversation with a cadet and say, like, hey, you failed your math test. You know what? got it. There may be a lack of preparation. There may be other things to that, but this place is designed to make you fail. And it's all about how you overcome that. And so it's really hard to be confident in that moment. And where I find like the biggest switch is like, okay, I can tell you, hey, be confident, right? Believe in yourself. Tell yourself you should be here. Use self affirmations and just say, by God, I made it to West Point. I belong here. Okay, so sometimes that might work, but most of the time it doesn't. So where I like to start is thinking about gratitude, and gratitude as an inroad to building confidence. When you can, like, so I'll ask a cadet, like, hey, give it 2 weeks. Let's start writing down 3 things that you're grateful for when you put your head on the pillow. And it's very simple, right? I'm not asking you to journal or, write a whole lot. I'm not adding to your homework plate. But before you put your head on the pillow, write 3 things down. And then it kind of goes to like, hunt the good stuff and, things like that. But what are 3 things that you're grateful for? Then you can kind of say, hey, well, 2 weeks later when I see you, hey, let's flip back through that. So were the last 3 weeks terrible? Were they sucky? Or here, do you have just a quick, like, little, just flip through your green book and see, hey, here's things that are going well in my life. Here's things that I'm grateful for. Are there things that you made happen that you're grateful for, right? I did well on my Sammy. Well, did you put work into that? And you can start to have this, conversation that starts with gratitude, but you can actually see like, hey, I made some of these good things happen, and, so it takes some time, but you can use that gratitude as a platform to build confidence. And you can go back through that, and so that in itself is a little bit of a journey. And I think that confidence is huge in performance psychology, but I also think it's really important in emotional intelligence, because you have to be confident to be vulnerable at times. You have to be confident to be able to handle these emotions, to make decisions, to self-regulate. And, I think it even ties to intrinsic motivation. That being confident and kind of that self-identity and owning who you are feeds, right into that model. And then it also, kind of helps you on those relationship management skills too, where you're like, I'm confident and I can be a little bit more socially aware and see other people. If you see that in your own journey of like, yeah, I was a people pleaser, or you're, where does that stem from? Then you're also probably far more socially aware and attuned to, hey, maybe this guy isn't an asshole, right? Maybe there's something else going on there. And you're more capable of looking into other people and seeing, like, I'm going to see beyond, what you just said to me, and let's go a little bit further. So I do think the gratitude, way of, inroad to confidence is really important.
That's huge. That's fascinating, and I never would have made that connection. What impact? Here's something else I found. So I've done a lot of executive coaching in my days, and one of the things I realized, and I've worked with, from Division I athletes to some CEOs and stuff, and what's been fascinating is the connection. So I'm a cheesy quotes guy, and one of my cheesy quotes is 100%. So 100% of the clients that I've worked with, and again, from athlete to CEO,
Yep.
100% of the people I've coached exhibit behaviors as an adult as a direct result of their childhood. 100%.
Yeah. Yep.
And I'm working with some executives right now, 100% of them exhibiting behaviors as an adult, as a direct of their childhood. So for me, part of my, so for me, I never would have thought to go through the gratitude route. For me, I like to know, hey, tell me about your childhood. How was that experience?
Yeah.
How's, your parents and, your siblings and that kind of thing, to see what the trends are, the themes are that could be positive and maybe not positive,
Mhm.
that they have had throughout their life. Because for me, it's like another cheesy quote: no one leaves their childhood unscathed, right? So everyone, even if you have Leave It to Beaver parents, right,
Right.
there's always some sort of, right, because then there's another thing that's been game changing for me is the concept of childhood emotional neglect. So not what happened to you, but what didn't happen to you, right? You
Mhm.
didn't get nurturing. When you maybe you needed it. You didn't get validation or affirmation when you needed, vulnerable moment or whatever. And so everyone leaves their childhood with some sort of emotional baggage. And for me, again, just in my journey, the more I started to make those connections and heal some of those areas and process some of those areas, have the emotional tools to identify and process those emotions around those scenarios. Man, once that started happening, I started to get more confident. And because for me, man, I feel like I've always been a great, a fairly grateful guy, but it never fully translated to confidence for me until I was able to resolve some of those childhood issues and stuff.
Mhm.
Right. Another one. This is another one. A buddy of mine told me during one of my episodes, episode 59 of the podcast. He said, "If you don't deal with your emotional issues, your children will."
Yeah. That's so true, right?
Right. And not just, you can spin it this way too. If you don't deal with your emotional issues, your coworkers will, your
Mhm.
company will, your staff will, your
House.
your clients will, your customers will. And so I mean, even your pillars, right? The performance mindset, the confidence, attention control, goal setting. My focus has changed as a result of me getting emotionally healthier. I used to be the squirrel guy, right? The AD, I invented ADD, right? And so it just, man, speaking about leadership, my decision making has gotten better the more emotionally intelligent that I've become. Have you seen those connections too, like with your baller background? Have you seen the
Oh,
connection with?
oh yeah. I mean, you think about like even just the science of decision making, right? And so, um, like if you were to talk about like the rational model of decision making, I think back to like MDMP and things like that, right? Is we want to get all the information we can. Um, you know, that if you've got like that emotional baggage, like it may even cloud where you're pulling information in that. And then if you think about like the actual um forgetting the word, but it's basically the instantaneous kind of, but there really is no kind of, hey, like there's like something called like the garbage can model of decision making. uh, but you actually have like all of these cues, right? So, think about, you know, as an infantryman and, downrange, like you might be making a very fast very instant decision, but your sympathetic nervous system might actually be responding to cues in the environment without you even being aware of it, right? When you get like, oh, the hairs in the back of my neck are standing up. Well, you can't really even articulate what it is that's setting you off. It could be a sound, it could be whatever. Um, that if you like aren't self-regulated in that moment, you're going to be missing those cues in that decision making. And so I think, when you talk about like emotional baggage or whatever, I think that in itself can block our ability to take in new information, process new information clearly, not through lenses, right? I mean, we always do have a lens. You can't get rid of them all, right? And be a completely unbiased, processor of information that's not human. But, so I think it does play so much into our decision making, even at like the base model of how we are processing information, emotion, can cloud that judgment too. So, yeah.
No, that's so true. And I tell people too, and this may be a little bit, so this I don't know if this is gonna, it seems like men or many men, my generation, maybe I could be more specific, do not seem to have the emotional skills or maybe some of the self-regulation that others do. I mean, that's my little non-research.
Anecdotal.
Anecdotal. There we go. That's right. How does one develop self-regulation?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. If I had the answer to that, we'd all be, like, I would be not a procrastinator, which I still am, and all of these other things. But when we talk about self-regulation, I link it back to like performance psychology and attention control and doing like, hey, we have to get rid of distractors. You have to be self-aware, like to go back to emotional intelligence and say, okay, I know that I fall prey to these distractors. So what can I do? The fact that I finally deleted Facebook app from my phone was for me like a huge battle in self-regulation.
In fact, it's funny you say that because so as a result of starting this podcast a year ago, and oddly enough, right before the pandemic hits the fan, at a time when emotional health has never been talked about more in my lifetime anyway.
Yeah.
And so from that podcast, we've started a couple EQ courses from our experience and our lessons learned, our practical, because it seems like there's two schools of that folks that know or are familiar with EQ is you've got the academics and you've got the C-level. And like everyone else in between is like, what are you talking about? What's emotional intelligence? That's just, again, my anecdotal, right? Yeah. And so, but what's funny is, so, and it's also turned into some consulting. And I've put together an EQ executive leader development program. And I'm certified EQ practitioner or whatever with this one particular model. And they've got the scientific EQ assessment, which has been fascinating. Yeah. No, that's awesome, Darcy. Well, thank you so much for your time. Yeah. I would love, so two things. So number one, I would love to do like a second series with you, and a whole nother interview if you'd be cool with that. Great, Darcy. Well, please give Troy a big giant hug for me.
I will. And thank you, Kathy.
Okay. Thanks, Darcy. Have a great day.
Okay. Bye, Noble.
Bye-bye.